Fortunately, the next person, that name I hopefully won't forget, yeah? So the next talk is by myself, and we will focus on infrastructure, yeah? And the next 15 minutes will be tightly packed with all the new monitoring integrations which we built and extended over the last 1 year. And we start with the new integrations, yeah? And for the new integrations, I will actually not go into what exactly we built, because you can try that out yourself, yeah? But why we built them, yeah? They all have a common story, yeah? For Azure, yeah, we heard about that yesterday. That was on the one hand side driven by, we want this ourselves. It fits our strategy, but also we got really a lot of support tickets around that. Podman, you saw, was one of the highly voted features in the ideas portal, so that was also for us obvious, okay, this is something which makes sense, a lot of people want it, let's build it. But there are two other ones, audio codes. Audio codes was actually built because one of the Checkmk customers said, hey, I want to finance that, I want this to be done properly by you guys, and so we built it. And I think this is a good showcase of something rather large, which we built for a customer. And then the last one is, I think, a little bit funny, yeah? Cisco SMA was also contracted by a customer, and I think when we were done with it, they told us, or actually they told me yesterday, they don't have Cisco SMA appliances anymore anyway, so they don't need it. But they are very happy. It's the University of Music and Arts in Graz in Austria. They're very happy that they were able to provide that to you. Yeah. And so I think that the important point for me is that these integrations, yeah, when we build new integrations, we don't build them because we want them, yeah, it's mostly we listen to you and then we decide, okay, these are the ones where it makes sense, where we have capacity, and then we try to build them. But new integrations are just a fraction of what we do. The majority of the time we actually spend on is expanding and modernizing integrations. Yeah, we have a huge catalog of plugins, more than 2,000, and you can imagine things change all the time. And so what we'll do now for the next part is to look into them. Yeah, we start with Windows. Yeah, a lot of things changing in the Microsoft Windows world. Then we go into network. Then we have a section on active checks and Oracle. And we'll talk also about the Checkmk agent. And there are a lot of other plugins I will not talk about today. Those are the ones around Proxmox, Hyper-V, Netscaler, and so on. And there are many more of them, right? We will start with Windows. And for Windows, we tackled one of the pain points. Can anyone guess what was one of the biggest pain points in our Windows monitoring?
Windows.
Windows itself, okay, great. I think I have even for that a fun story, because we have a lot of pain when we want to monitor Windows, which is due to Windows. But one of the things we actually introduced ourselves was this pain, Windows time monitoring, because the old way of how we did Windows time monitoring led to false alerts, especially when you use the push agent. And so we decided, let's rebuild the Windows time monitoring in a way which fits how we actually do it on Linux. Yeah? And so we have a native Windows time monitoring service. You can see it here. Everything as you wish. Yeah, you can see offset, when was it last synced, and it really fits now what we build also for Linux. But we said, let's take it one step further, because on this service you can see if you are then out of sync. But very often out of sync starts before. It starts when you don't have, for example, connection to a peer anymore. So we also have now a check for each time peer which you sync with, and they are automatically discovered. So if you have multiple of them, you will see all of them, but there's also a summary service. And that way, if the synchronization with a peer fails, you see it actually very early on. And the cool thing is, all of the things here can be configured with rule sets. So this is not just, okay, we just throw out a plugin, but we thought about, okay, what are the relevant rule sets around that, both for the Windows time service, but also for the Windows time service peers, and what are relevant thresholds which we should apply out of the box. So Windows time was one problematic thing. Maybe what other thing is in Windows bugging you? What other thing would you like to be better in Checkmk for Windows monitoring? Anyone? Lars, maybe you know something? Events, very good. We talked about it last year. It was, I think, for our customers, Windows event monitoring always a pain. And what our Checkmk consultant said to customers was always, disable it. And that is, of course, one way how to do it. And the problem is Windows writes thousands of events. Yeah, it's very verbose and talks a lot. And so what you need is you need to be able to filter it. And so there's now in the Windows agent a new capability to filter it. And we put a lot of thought into it, like how we can actually filter it in a sensible way. And now come a couple of Windows peculiarities. The first thing is you can filter by event ID, which I think is probably the best way to do it because Windows event IDs work in all languages of Windows. They're not local dependent because if you monitor Windows, we often build it for English systems, then we roll it out to you, and then we realize, okay, the Windows just responds differently when you have a German Windows. Yeah? And therefore, for example, Windows event IDs are very good to filter because you have very fine-grained control. And how we build it is that you can include and exclude very flexibly, as you can see here. So you can allow list, you can exclude. And I think with that, it becomes much more powerful. Event ID is one option. The other option is, for example, to do it by event source. That way you can drop chatty sources, for example, these ones. And you can also filter by event user, event user. This is something which I would say only do if you know what you're doing. And then lastly, you can also filter by message patterns. So if you have a custom application, you can also decide these are the patterns which I want to be filtered for that application. So you can see we thought really a lot about how to do that. And then there's always something which we sometimes forget. We forget our own stuff. We forget that we have this appliance. And this appliance, it runs in failover sometimes. And so the issue is when you monitor logs with Checkmk, we always save from which IP we were queried. Yeah? And then we only send the difference of what logs happened in the time between. And what happens if you have an appliance and a failover, a new IP requests the logs from the agent, and then the agent sends everything. And that is great, right? So now there's a new feature there that you can specify IPs, cluster them, so that in that case, if there's a failover of your appliance, there's no more log storm. We stay in the Windows world. Yeah? The next topic is MSSQL. Here, this is more like a service announcement. It's now time for you to make that switch to our new plugin. I think in 2.2 we still had the old VBS-based plugin, and in 2.3 we decided to modernize it to build a cross-platform plugin for both Linux and Windows. And over the time we added a lot of functionality around it, and I think now it's a really well-rounded agent plugin, and it does everything which we had before and more. But it also means that now is the time for you to make the switch. Yeah? This will then be gone in Checkmk 3.0, so now you have the time. And this is not the only VBS thing which you have to get rid of. All the other VBS-based plugins which we had, you can see them here, they are also now deprecated. They are replaced by new PowerShell-based plugins. That's much safer, much better to maintain. You get the same services, so you don't have to reconfigure anything with regards to services. You have to roll out these new agent plugins now. And if you don't do it, one way we deprecate and remove them. The other thing is Windows just, I think in 2027 or 2028, will shut down VBS. So the time is ticking. And then we've also a new thing. I don't know, if you have tried Checkmk 2.5, you might have seen this thing here. There's a new connector for Microsoft Entra ID. And we actually had people who then came to us and said, this is really cool. They tried it out and saw, this is also very nice to use. Yeah, you're guided in this complex process to connect with Microsoft Entra ID. And then they were like curious, okay, what can they do with that now? And here come the bad news. You can monitor Checkmk emails with that. Yeah, and this was like, because the root cause for that was Microsoft changes the way how you can monitor emails. They have changed it over the years, a couple of times. Last time it was when we had to change to Exchange Web Services, EWS. EWS, I think, gets shut down in October this year. So if you want to monitor Microsoft Mail, you now have to switch over to the Graph API. But the Graph API requires that you authenticate with Microsoft Entra ID. And that's why we built that entire workflow. And it's, I think, a beginning. I think it's a good basis because that allows also to reuse this for the future for other things. But we built it initially now for Microsoft Mail. And now back to Windows. It wouldn't be Microsoft or Windows if there wouldn't be a specific special thing. So there's a unique feature around that. After 24 hours of inactivity, the token will be invalidated by Microsoft. There's nothing we can do about it. That's something which Microsoft does, which works really great for monitoring. Because, when it doesn't work, then you have to go into the UI and re-authenticate. So I think this is something to keep in mind when you do Microsoft Mail monitoring from the future on. Always keep it running. Yeah. Now, from Windows, we go to network. Yeah? And we had a couple of years ago Cisco Meraki monitoring. And there was one person in the audience here, I think every year he asked me, can you extend that? I have something much better than what you have. And every year I said to him, yeah, next year, next year, next year. I think this year was the year, or last year was the year where I said, okay, I cannot postpone that further. And so we decided to mainline that. It was a huge plugin. You can see all the things which this guy did. And if you see the green line, you can see it has become part of Checkmk 2.5. And with that also you get nice things like network topology, if you use this other thing this guy built. Because then you can see this works, I think, quite out of the box with Cisco Meraki. So you get that. And speaking about this network topology, this is something which works not only for Cisco Meraki, but all around. So you can discover with LLDP data and with CDP data and with more things, network relationships. Which interface talks to which interface with which device. And you can build that way a map of your network and see if you have, for example, issues, yeah? If there's a mismatch on duplex or whatever. And that is something which was really cool, and we said, we need to enable this a little bit better. Yeah? We need to make the pain to go to that, because this is a custom extension by someone in the community called THLCMK. And we said, let's make it a little bit easier. And so we decided that we mainline all the inventory plugins into Checkmk. So if you go to Checkmk 2.5, what will happen that for each network device you will get now CDP or LLDP data if it's there, but you also get for SNMP, Windows, Linux, you can get IP information, yeah, and interface names. And with that, this is the basis to build these topologies. And for that, you now are only one MKP away, and that's the network visualization data creation tool. And the great thing is, yeah, before you had to go on the command line to run it, I think we motivated this guy that he extends that. And when we said, okay, we will mainline it, so he built this GUI setup. And I can tell you it's really easy because I tried it at home at my house. And you have an active check which creates the entire topology. It's really super simple, and I think this is now the barrier to try this is super small. I can just recommend it, and I want that we all applaud Thomas, because Thomas built all of these things. And so thank you, Thomas. I think it's great because the best thing is Thomas is not a Checkmk user. Yeah, I think he's just a network specialist who somehow just like is in this audience, I think because of Andreas Döhler. And I think this is a good team, and together they build a lot of things around Checkmk, and I think I'm super happy that you are here, that you help. And I think now you also have a workshop tomorrow on network topology, 2 workshops. So if you want to know more about it, these workshops are a great thing. Always reach out to him in the forum. He's very active. He responds fast in the forum than on mail. So that's how you can reach out to him. Okay. Now, I think I will need a little bit more than the time which I have planned. Sorry for that. You saw with MSSQL that we tried a different approach. We built in 2.3, and it was a complete new foundation which we built. And what we promise is that we extend it over time. And I think in the last 2 releases, we did a lot of things to make it much better. And the same thing we did for the active checks for HTTP monitoring and for certificate monitoring. In 2.3, we built them fresh. And now over the last 2 years, we tried to make them to round them up, to improve and extend the functionality so that they become really great features. And for example, for HTTP monitoring, you get now the URL back in the service summary. If you use escape HTML, you can even see the entire line. There's still things which we need to improve, but there's a lot around here which has improved around the service summary and the details. But also, there are a couple of things where we listen to your feedback. For example, one of the things which pained users is that it always went to crit if the search for the string was failing, and now you can set the state for that, for example, to Warren. TLS, something where we caved in after many discussions, and we now have this compatibility mode. Initially, we didn't want to do it because it hides things, it hides issues, but then I think the reality is IT is just a little bit more diverse, that not everything can be done the way it should be done, and that's why we have the compatibility mode. It puts makeup on issues, so it's up to you how to do it. It's just way less strict, so up to you. Lastly, proxy is now in a much better way. It can be configured. Before it was a one-liner where you had to write everything into it. That also led that the credentials for that were exposed. Now it's properly configured. You can also use the password store for that. And that way you can use proxy for HTTP monitoring much better. We also refined our certificate monitoring, has actually a couple of new features. You can now also use different connection types, for example, StarTLS for SMTP, Postgres, IMAP, and LDAP. We also worked a lot on the service summary and improved everything back in there, so we refined it further. And you also get the proxy functionality in the certificate monitoring. There's one other thing where we now work a lot on, where we spent actually the last year to build that foundation again, because this is something which has played out quite well for us, to invest into a foundation and then refine on that over time. And the next big thing is Oracle database monitoring. We have now built that foundation. We're at the moment refining it so that it becomes something where we say, hey, this is something which you should now start using. We decided for 2.5 to release it as experimental. It covers already a lot of functionality. Yeah? We are still extending it at the moment, but I think it's already in a stage where you can start testing it. And that would be something which I would ask you, because it helps us a lot, because Oracle environments are just very different. Yeah? Every customer has something special, and at some point we want to get rid of the old Oracle plugin and replace it with this new plugin. And for that we need your help. If you have Oracle, please try it out, let us know. We'll do our best to make this as good as before and even better than in the future. Now, talking about the agent, there was this one idea, to also have the agent controller run on AIM. That is now possible. We have the rule set customized agent package. There's an option that you can now build it for ARM systems, so you can also properly monitor with the agent controller ARM systems. Before, you always had to use the old way, just the agent script, but now the entire thing is a rounded package for monitoring ARM systems. And lastly, talking about the agent updater, the couple of quality of life improvements which we did. For example, the Checkmk agent service, which sometimes was stuck in critical, because it was not updated yet. It relied on cached information. That's not like that anymore. We have now a synchronous plugin, so the information isn't stale. And the Checkmk agent service, when you have updated the agent, it will now go to green much faster. The updater now runs also under the agent controller user. And that is because we also made a new thing available. You can now register the updater with the controller. And to make that possible, the agent controller user also has the capabilities, permissions by default to do the agent updater registration. And for you, that means actually nothing has to change. The migration can run at your own pace. The CMK update agent command line parameters, they're all still there. So nothing breaks when you go to 2.5 with that regard. So you can then start, if you want, to migrate to the agent controller for the registration. But nothing breaks. I think this was an important piece. So As you can hopefully see, we did a couple of new things, but the bulk of the work is extending and modernizing plugins. Yeah? And this is something which I think will continue like that, because just the broad range of things which we monitor will always mean we need to extend and modernize and improve them over time, because IT is always changing. And it's something which I like at least a lot. I hope that in the future we can continue and do even more things in that regard, because this is really the heart of Checkmk, these monitoring plugins.